Today's guest is the fabulous Carla Crivaro. She is a sex, love and relationship coach. And today we talked about a lot of things, but just to touch the surface, we talked about the top 10 reasons that couples stop having sex, how the pill can be responsible for the breakdown in relationships. And finally, we talked about self-pleasure and claiming back what makes you tick. So Carla, absolutely thrilled to have you. We had our lovely chat over Zoom recently. Energy is definitely aligned. I thought, you've got to come on. You've got to talk about all this stuff on the Elle-Sera podcast because I just know that the women are going to love it. Before we jump in, we've just been having a little chat behind the camera about the Telegraph. The Telegraph today have put out there the 10 top reasons why people stop having sex. And I'm going to read them out and I'm going to see if you agree with this because, you know, it's your area of expertise and you can agree or disagree with some of them. So
can I ask you just before you start?
Go on.
So the reasons for not having sex is for men, women, both?
This is couples.
Couples.
So the top 10 reasons couples no longer have sex. So 45% feeling too tired. Do you agree with that one? Is that one up the top with yours? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Life being too stressful. That was at 29%, followed by different sex drives at 28%. And then all around about the kind of like 16 to 20% where libidos have changed over time, low or no intimacy, work being stressful. We've got that stress word coming in again. Sex is no longer a priority. Arguments within the relationship, having children, and then the last one was personal insecurities. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I find that really, really interesting that tired is one of the first ones that come up. I think that is because most people, and we were saying it literally, as you said, just before we hit record, that so many people, you know, now it's Christmas time, are not putting themselves as a priority and saying yes to too many things. Like, so one of the things that I tend to talk with both men and women is something like boundaries. So learning to say no. And boundaries are a really important part of actual self-care because a lot of people think self-care is, you know, going to the gym. And it is, you know, and going to the spa and looking after your nails. And it is, you know, all of those elements can help towards your self-care. But one of the biggest ways of supporting yourself is learning the power of the word no. And around Christmas time, what we do is we end up spreading ourselves really, really thin and saying yes to everything because we feel like we need to be everywhere. We need to see all of the family that are asking to see us, all of the friends, all of the work commitments. And sometimes we just need to really, really slow down and say to ourselves, you know, how am I feeling right now? Like if I take a moment and tune into my body and really connect to how I'm feeling, is it a true yes? Is it something that I want to do and I want to attend? And, you know, a lot of the women that you will come across, you know, they have started choosing Elle-Sera for their, you know, hormone support because they've noticed that in their body something doesn't feel right. And so listening and really tuning into your body, whether that's, you know, do I need something to support my physical health or is it something that I need to support my mental health? So the fact that tiredness is one of the like top ones is really, really not surprising at all. And then what were the other ones?
A lot of them were stress related. So it was work related stress. It was seasonal related stress. Obviously Christmas is a very stressful time. You've just said it then. We see a significant increase in ladies that will say, I'm going to skip this month's subscription because they've got all of this pressure on them that, you know, they have to buy for everybody else in their family. So they don't prioritize themselves, which is actually the worst time to stop taking
because you
Elle-Sera.
need it more. This
Absolutely.
is when self-care is more important. Like, and this is the thing, you know, people's good habits that they have, you know, those good habits, you need them more when times are difficult. So, you know, if you have like meditation as part of your routine or you have like food supplements, you know, to support your physical health, you know, if you go dancing, you know, if you go for a run, you know, if you do exercise, a lot of people drop those things that help support you around times when things are difficult, and that's when you need them more. So,
absolutely. So we come back to stress. So it's work-based stress, it's financial stress.
Yeah.
Life can
familial stress as well.
Absolutely. So we've hit kind of tiredness from a stress perspective. We talked about it before. You don't realise the hormonal effect from stress. We just have this big word of stressed or anxious. And no one really realizes that fundamentally your hormones have a really big part to play in that. Do you find that with some of your clients?
Yeah. So, and I think what a lot of people need to realize is with stress is quite often stress, anxiety, depression is a way of you avoiding something that's going on deeper within inside yourself. So, taking the time to really slow down and try to understand, what is it that I'm avoiding? Am I avoiding saying no to somebody? Am I avoiding asking for help or support or for something that I need? And also, can it be that am I avoiding experiencing an emotion? So am I worried about something, but ignoring that worry? Especially at this time of year, people have this pressure to spend lots of money on their children. And I have children as well. So I understand, that societal pressure of, wanting my children to fit in and feeling like they have enough in comparison to everybody else. And so, there is so much pressure to spend money, to do lots of different things that we don't necessarily want to do or we have the capacity for. And so really being able to, think about that, have, what is within my capacity and what isn't, whether that's physical, emotional. And then, if you do notice that you are worried about those things, allowing yourself to just spend time with that worry, rather than moving on and trying to ignore it by, going drinking or, some people use exercise as a way of avoiding as well. So, it's being mindful of the strategies that you use. Are they supporting you? Are they trying to avoid feeling that discomfort? Am I angry about something? Am I under a lot of pressure at work to meet certain deadlines and I don't feel I'm being respected and actually I'm holding on to a lot of anger? So really slowing down, tuning into, how you're experiencing your body and recognizing what emotions you're feeling and spending some time with those and allowing yourself to sit with it rather than just moving on and finding something to distract you. A common one nowadays is like social media, grabbing the phone, scrolling through to completely distract you from, those emotions that you might be feeling. So yeah, my tips with regards to stress would be do the things that support you, say more no's, ask for more help, and then connect to what the emotions are that you're feeling and give yourself the time to be with them.
Yeah, it's a lovely insight into how you tell people how to deal with stress. We jumped straight in at the Telegraph because it was hot on our heads because we were talking about it before. But I'm just going to kind of backpedal a little bit to talk about you and the work that you do within relationships, whether that be from an intimacy perspective, whether it be from a confidence perspective. When we say this is Carla and Carla does this, what is this?
So I'm a sex, love and relationship coach, and I work with men and women who have lacked confidence in the bedroom, who feel a little bit insecure. Maybe they don't even enjoy sex anymore. And I support them in feeling more desirable, regaining that confidence. And then when it comes to relationships, I support either individuals or couples that are feeling disconnected, feeling lonely, feeling like, they're trapped in blame cycles. Mm-hmm. And I support them to create a greater connection and intimacy, both emotional and physical as well.
Brilliant. We had a conversation recently and the word that you used, I always associate it with like someone like Beyonce, but you said we're going into this kind of queendom era, especially obviously with women. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so with that was referring to women who are like in their late 30s, early 40s, generally in 50s.
Yeah.
So it's women that are sort of perimenopausal, making that transition. And one of the things that I noticed, because I work with women of different ages, so I have clients like from the 20s, and then I think the oldest client that I've worked with was in her 50s. So, seeing those differences in ages and how women show up differently, what I notice and what I see, and also, colleagues say things that are similar. When we're in our 20s, we tend to be very much giving, people pleasing, trying to find the right man. We can feel a lot of stress and apprehension. We feel our biological clock is ticking. So we feel we need to grab, the best man that will do at the time. And a lot of women find themselves in that situation. And then they're in their 30s with children, giving a lot of themselves to their children and to their partner. And then there gets a point, and it is generally around that transition into, menopause, so perimenopause, where women sort of like take a look at themselves and go, hang on a minute, you know, I've devoted and given my life so much to other people, you know, and I'm sick of, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
You can go nuts, yeah.
So, you know, I'm really sick of the bullshit. You know, I'm really sick of being the person that's giving to everybody else, not asking for myself. And so there's this like transition almost where women turn from being like the maiden archetype or the mother archetype and like step into their queendom. And it's this idea of like an awakening within themselves, you know, a part of themselves that's always been there, but in a way has lain dormant because they've not felt the confidence to be able to express themselves. You know, they start having better boundaries. And a lot of people say that men have like a midlife crisis. And I question whether it's men that instigate that or whether it's women who no longer take the bullshit that then create this, in the relationship that they are in, this sort of like rocking the boat almost, and the men find themselves not knowing who they are because the women have said, I'm not doing it anymore. Yeah. And that creates then within the men this sort of like feeling of, holy crap, who am I? Yeah. You know? So, and I do see when I'm, you know, working with couples that it is very, very often the women that are making that step. Like all of a sudden this realization that, you know, lots of stuff that they've been holding on to from their childhood, you know, small t trauma. So I'm not talking about things like sexual abuse, but I'm talking about, you know, bad relationships and parents not always showing up for us in the best way possible. You know, coming to that realization when you're in your 30s and 40s of these patterns that have been going on throughout your lives. And then you say, no, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not taking it. And it does, it creates this, in the relationship, this sort of feeling of people, both people in the relationship not knowing fully who they are and almost having to rediscover themselves. And so I prefer to call it like the queen years because, you know, if you think of a queen, she's somebody who is in charge of her kingdom, has that authority, respect, but also is doing it in a way that isn't necessarily taking, you know, but is very mindful of the people around her, but is no longer overgiving. So that's why I like to refer to it as like heading into the queen years.
Brilliant. It was so funny you said it and I was thinking, is this some form of Beyonce statement? These are people that cheer her on? But you've explained it so beautifully. I think a really big one as well that we definitely get with our ladies at kind of Elle-Sera is, I think societally, people used to get together when they were very young. They would get married, they would have families, they would kind of grow together. But then they would get to a stage where empty nest syndrome, children have gone, things are starting to, you know, feelings are starting to develop in areas that maybe once didn't before. And I think for some of them, that is due to the stopping of taking of the contraceptive pill, which I know your eyes have lit up because our views are very aligned on this. I had been on a contraceptive pill or some form of contraception from the age of 13, not because I was sexually active, but because I had horrendous periods, awful acne, and it was this case of the doctor saying, just go on this and this will fix everything. I luckily came off the pill around about 5 years ago. I did the Mirena coil. I am now completely contraceptive free in that respect. And I feel much better for it. I've got much better mental clarity and my judgment is better. And I look at the relationships.
And you feel calmer as well and able to deal with things better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I take Elle-Sera, people will say you're biased, you work for the company, but it's really helped me. I am balanced. I have now met the partner. You know, people go like, oh, I had our partner. I now know that I've met the partner I'm going to be with forever. And I can say that with complete confidence because the other relationships that had come before it, I don't know how I was selecting them, but I don't think I was in charge of that decision.
Do you know, there was like this research done around women that took the pill and women that didn't take the pill, and they gave them like men's sweaty t-shirts to have a sniff of. Do you know about this?
Pheromones.
So, yeah, exactly.
We love that pheromone conversation.
So the women that were on the pill chose a man that was genetically closer to them than the women who weren't on the pill, which is really, really interesting. So because it can affect who we actually fall in love with. Like, how crazy is that? Yeah. And, you know, when you look biologically speaking, we need to be in a relationship with somebody who's genetically as far from us as we can possibly have, just so that we It doesn't affect, any genetic mutations or disorders or anything along those lines, more likely to have a healthier child. So, and how many people are going into a relationship, taking the pill, thinking that they're in love with somebody, then they come off the pill and then they're looking at this guy and they're like, I don't know why I'm with you, and, to a certain extent, that is something that's similar to happen to me. I think there was a lot of things around that as well. But I do think the pill had something to do with that, because how I showed up as a human being when I was taking it, I wasn't the most pleasant of people. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing research on one of them that I was taking. I won't name any names because, But there was one, and I remember reading an article, and I think it was Cosmopolitan or something, about this particular pill. So I went on the internet, and there were loads of women experiencing the same problems. And then I started doing more research and reading the information leaflets that you get with them. And, the pill is one of the things that I do regret doing. Of all of the toxic, damaging relationships, abusive, where there was cheating and all of those things, I could say I don't necessarily regret those, because having gone through those experiences, it's created the person that I am, and it's created a lot of learning for me. But what I feel myself the pill has done for me, and my body and my mental health as well, during that time, I think that's probably one of the only things that I ever regret doing is taking it. Not even, those bad men that cheated on me and said not very nice things and were, really quite cruel, and, the whole gaslighting and thing. I wouldn't even change that, because it's made me the person that I am. And also I'm able to relate to and hold space for the women that come to me who have been in those situations as well, know. So I can identify with people, that experience and are coming out of those types of relationships and, rediscovering themselves. But the pill is the one thing that I wish that I hadn't done, I hadn't taken.
I had a call literally this morning from a customer of ours, again, no names, she'll know exactly who she is. Her stepdaughter is going through pretty much the same thing I did when I was 13, heavy periods.
And the doctors
acne,
just give them sweets or something.
Feeling, I have the PCOS and the endo, double-edged sword, but I used to suffer horrendously with excessive body hair. This poor girl's going through the same thing. And she just said, I spoke to the GP and they said about putting her on the pill. And I said, well, what about something herbal like Elle-Sera? And they just kind of rolled eyes at her as if to say no, if it's not pharmaceutical, it's not going to help. We do have a lot of teenagers that take this up, but we don't market. It's not something that we'd ever do. But if our customers choose at their discretion to give Elle-Sera to their girls, which is what's happening with great results, actually. There was a piece in Chat magazine about it that we didn't actually know about. And then someone came to us and said, oh, we read it in Chat magazine. Fabulous. And it's because of this thing of, you say, it's given out like Smarties. It's given out just so willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And the side effects of the birth control pill, the negatives do not outweigh the positive.
And something that I want to, make people aware of, so I sometimes go into a woman's membership who supports women around their hormones. Yeah. And she regularly talks about the fact that, young women, their periods are going to be irregular, sometimes heavy, sometimes light. It's going to take a few years before they actually become regular and consistent in heaviness, in pain, and all of those different things. So it does take time, and we need to give women's bodies time to adjust before we start then giving them pharmaceuticals. And one of the reasons being is, from the reading that I have done, is interrupting the communication, of the different glands within the body, has really detrimental effects, because you're basically shutting off that communication. Mm-hmm. And then what that does affects the rest of the body, because the hormones are so intrinsically linked to every system within us. And especially with women, I was reading something recently that was actually saying that, when you're in a relationship and you have children, the men should be the ones that get up in the middle of the night to support the children, as long as obviously the woman's not breastfeeding, because she needs to support the children in that way. But The men need to do that because lack of sleep really affects women's hormones considerably more than it does affect men. You know, men will complain more about it.
Yeah.
And then as women, we feel like this sense of responsibility of, oh, well, you know, he's complaining a lot, which means that it's really difficult. But I remember feeling absolutely exhausted getting up 2 or 3 times in the night to support my children. But I just got on with it. You know, I just did it.
And then imagine that fatigue with the notion of not feeling very desirable because, you know, and having children and the pressure of having this very monotonous life cycle that's going on and on and on.
It's exciting. Who wants to have sex when it's
So you're then looking at that list that we looked at earlier. There's 5 of those there just on the basis of having a child, not supporting the partner. It's another real big factor we get is ladies that go, I'm expected to just be everything to everybody. When would anybody ever ask a mum who's looking after the baby? But they'll ask my partner, oh, who's looking after the baby? Can you get out tonight? You'll look after the baby. Well, hold on a minute. I've got things that I want to do. Who's going to look after the baby for me? Why is it always put onto
the
mum?
women? Yeah. So this is really interesting conversation because there's 2 parts to this. So what happens is a lot of women, I like to call it the mother and son dynamic. So what I'm referring to is that women show up as the mother and then men start showing up almost as like the son in the relationship. So women start taking on the mental load. They start telling their partner what to do, when to do it and how to do it. And the problem is when you sort of take the initiative away from a human being, they stop using their initiative. And so, you know, a lot of men do want to please their partners. You know, they're very keen to be supportive and to nurture, and they want to be there. And what a lot of people don't realize, and I've given a name to this phenomenon and I've called it the forgotten father. What a lot of women don't realize is that actually a lot of men struggle when a child is born. And the reason being is a lot of focus is on mum and baby. So mum and baby during the pregnancy, mum and baby during the birth. You know, it tends to be the woman that makes the decision on the pram, on the colours of the nursery. And men start gradually feeling like more and more on the outside. Then the birth comes, and for a lot of medicalized births that we have nowadays, like a lot of women are, you know, pushed into induction, which ultimately then results in a cesarean. Yeah. And that is in itself a whole completely different topic. But then what happens is, you know, men are then not having been given the opportunity to learn how to support their partner. They basically rock up on the day with no idea of what's going to happen. They might have had 2 or 3 like antenatal classes or something along those lines, but they've not had the emotional support of how to emotionally support their own partner.
Yeah.
So they're in this like freeze state more often than not, like, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing? And they see their partner in distress or in pain or worried, and they feel like, you know, they can't do anything. Yeah. They have no power to change anything. And it really gives them this sense for a lot of men of, I'm not good enough. I'm not able to. And that sows the seed from the beginning.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
They want to feel like a man.
And they want to be able to help or do something, even if that is just knowing how to support somebody emotionally, but they've not been taught the skills to do that.
Yeah.
So what happens is then they start their relationship with their child and the new mother as in, I'm not good enough. You know, I can't show up. And then that then carries through in their relationship then.
Babies being in bed with parents. I imagine that's a big one as well when it comes to your clients coming in and talking about their sex life taking a hit.
Yeah.
Because baby now is everything.
Yeah.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast, but I need to ask a favour. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, then please hit that subscribe button right now. I'll be straight up and honest that I want to see this podcast grow and flourish into something that I'm really proud of. And the only way that I can do that is with your help. So if you've ever learned anything useful from these conversations, then please return the favour by liking, rating, subscribing, and maybe even sharing it with your friends. Thanks very much. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, and the baby does need to be, you know, the center of the parents' attention. But the thing is, unfortunately, the men haven't received that support, so they don't know how to support the women. And so, you know, there begins this like frustration that women feel like men aren't showing up for them. But there isn't this ability for a lot of women, and I'll hold my hand up at the beginning. I didn't see that either. It took my own journey with my own, you know, father of my children to actually gradually see how he was feeling and how he was experiencing it. Because then, a lot of women don't work or they reduce their hours. Then there becomes such a huge responsibility on the men to be the provider. And that is a lot of stress, especially then when, mortgage interest rates go up and, the cost of living goes up. So the stress that men are feeling, and, unfortunately, a lot of men are very much by themselves. They have less friendships and less connections when they enter a relationship.
Yeah.
So they don't have the opportunity to go and speak to their male friends or open up vulnerably, because when they do meet their male friends, it tends to be banter in the pub. So there isn't that opportunity for really expressing how they feel. So a lot of men feel extremely isolated and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you're feeling isolated and lonely? You don't act in the best way. And so 3 of the ways that a lot of men will act out because they're feeling isolated, lonely, not good enough is like a child. So their own inner child comes out. And the 3 ways tend to be either completely withdrawing.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't, they will not want to show up for family events. They'll probably work late. They'll find a way to not participate. Another one can be over people pleasing, so and self-abandoning completely, and that can be really irritating. When you've got a partner that's not sort of strong and sticking up for themselves and they're saying yes to everything, because even though as women we might think that we want a man that says yes and does what we want, actually we don't, because we don't feel safe. If a man can't say no to us, then how can we trust that he's going to say no to somebody else and to protect us if we need that sort of protection?
Yeah.
So, we do want a man to say no to us, in a nice way, in a firm way, because, we don't actually want to rule the roost, even if we think we might do. And the third way can be, passive aggressive comments, because, like a naughty child, and I'll use inverted commas there, sometimes when we want attention, we will act in not the best way.
Yeah.
Passive aggressive comments, not being very kind, not being very nice, because we want the attention from our partner. So my suggestion is to any women that are listening, if you notice those traits, in your partner, and you're either pregnant, recently had a child, or even, because I've, spoken to people who support parents with tweens and teenagers.
Yep.
Men can carry this through for a long, long time. So if you notice that you've got a partner who behaves in one of those 3 ways and sometimes fluctuates between the 3 of them, it's very likely that they are feeling isolated in regards to the relationship with the mother and child.
Yeah, completely. And I see that with my friendship circles, and and it's difficult because I'm not a mother, I'm not married. So when they talk to me and ask for advice from me, it's very difficult as an observer from the outside looking in. I see the terminology narcissism or self-sabotage so frequently. We've spoken about this so flippantly put out there. I definitely have been in relationships with narcissists, and I've been with relationships with self-saboteurs, but not every man is that. And I think on the whole, when I look at social media, it's very, very quick to jump to this idea that, it's all the man's fault. When actually we as women can be to blame for some of it too. It's equal.
And the thing is, with the mother and son dynamic, it is a dynamic.
Yes.
And the reason that I am very mindful of using the word dynamic is because I've worked with women as individuals to make changes to how they show up, which has affected that dynamic.
Yeah.
So women who, he doesn't do anything around the house, and when I try and get him to do this, he doesn't do it, or he forgets, or he makes a mess of it. And, that like real frustration.
Yeah.
And so when I work with that woman as an individual, the way that she needs to change within herself and how she interacts with her partner will actually then change that dynamic. And I've also worked with men on the other side of that. Quite often those men tend to be people pleasers, self-abandoning, a part of themselves that they're in a denial, or they'll have like lots of resentment because they're not speaking up for themselves. So working with men around those parts of themselves then means that they're showing up differently and their partner responds to that. And it's not an immediate thing. It can take like between 3 to 6 months, because once you start changing how you as an individual show up in your relationship, your partner's got so used to the old you that it's going to take some time for them to adapt to the new you. And also, even though the new patterns that you need to put in place, the new way of doing things, you're not going to do it every single time. You still slip back sometimes into the old way of doing things. So it's going to take time for you to make the change and then for them to follow that change as well.
What's the difference when it comes to same-sex couples?
I don't really work too much with same-sex couples, but what I know from speaking to colleagues is they do tend to be able to fall better into individual roles, and there's a lot more communication around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had a lot of experience with same-sex couples, but speaking to colleagues around this mother and son dynamic, asking them exactly that question, they do tend to fall into those roles better. And they're able to be more fluid as well, so that they know that, if one of them is choosing to stay at home more with the baby, and the other one is going to work more, as being more of the breadwinner, they are more able to then, if for whatever reason that needs to change, they're able to be more fluid with that.
More adapting.
Yeah, whereas, the thing is with heterosexual couples, there is a lot more of those, gender roles that were sort of like...
Biology. Yeah.
I don't know if it's so much biology. I mean, if you're breastfeeding and giving birth, you need to have a vagina and a vulva to be able to do that at present.
Yeah.
So that is going to determine, and also for the breastfeeding, although there is a way to breastfeed even if you haven't given birth, there's a process you can take yourself through to get to that. But I've lost my trail of thought now.
It's all right. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, the reason that I ask these questions is that, our platform primarily is for women. But every now and again, what's lovely is when you hear that there is a man that's listened and he's taken something away from it, or, it doesn't mean to be that all relationships are male and female and have that male-female chemistry. We do have ladies from same-sex relationships. We've got gentlemen that take Elle-Sera that are in same-sex relationships. So I always like to make sure that it's open for everyone. Everyone can get involved in listening to it. And so although you may not have them on your client list, you definitely could signpost to assistance.
Yeah.
Should anyone be listening to this and want some assistance for same-sex relationship, I could still send them your way and you could put them in contact with the right person.
And also people that don't identify as male or female, that consider themselves, a trans person or non-binary. Yeah. So I have colleagues that work, specifically with those people, those sexual orientations, those sexual identities. And the reason being is because of the training that I've done, I take a lot of my own experience as a woman and being conditioned as a woman and growing up with, everything that it means to identify as a woman. And then I did a specific year training in sexuality for men, heterosexual men. So that's why I work with men and women. And I know that my colleagues who identify as non-binary and transgender, they are
have an
better
understanding.
And they're better to hold space. Also, there are so many nuances because there's nuances to being a woman. We don't have all the same experiences. No. And the same for men, they don't have all of the same experiences. And it's the same for non-binary people, coming to recognize what their identity is. That journey is very, very individual for each person. So, but having somebody who also identifies as non-binary holding that space for you just feels so much more supportive and also safer as well. Yeah. So, and, in my practice, it's important for me that my clients have that sense of safety. So I need to do my own work on myself, especially in relationship to men. I've done a lot of my own sort of like healing with my relationship to men to be able to hold space for men. Yeah. And so, for people then, that's within my scope of practice. And then my colleagues that are transgender and non-binary have done a lot of their own work around, their healing around their own identity to then to be able to hold space for that community as well.
Brilliant. You have touched on it with me in our private conversations, and I think that it's a lovely conversation that we could perhaps finish with. It can sometimes be deemed as a little bit icky to talk about things like self-pleasure. And we don't deal with icky things. I had a whole conversation with an amazing lady called Katie Cottam. She runs a brand called Luna Daily, and I think we said, Calvin, did we say vulva and vagina around about 47 times in that conversation? More, we should have done like a ding on every time we did it. There shouldn't be boundaries on what you can talk about. We are forever plagued with social media bans because we have spoken about menstruation or menopause or anxiety or overwhelm. You can't talk about these things, and we should be able to talk about them. And quite often, we're now talking about relationships, but let's talk about the people that might not be in a relationship. They can still be sexual. They can still have pleasure, and they can do that solo in a multitude of ways. Please tell me all about that.
Yeah. So, and also, what I was going to say is, self-pleasure, you don't need to be single to experience self-pleasure, So another way, because just to clarify, some people be like, what's self-pleasure? So self-pleasure, another name for it is masturbation.
There you go. Ding,
ding. Doing it while you're in a relationship as well. So for women, it's really important. Well, for men as well, for both men and women, it's really important that, you get to understand your own body. For women, creating different pathways to pleasure as well. So being able to understand what you like and what you dislike, how you like your clitoris to be touched. Do you want penetration when you're touching yourself? Do you not? Do you want to experience anal pleasure? So giving yourself like the full range of possibilities that are out there. Also, the more, the different ways that you pleasure yourself means that when you are with a partner, it's easier to access orgasms. Right. Because the way that the body works for a woman is the more orgasms that you have, the more orgasms that you want. Yeah. So for the people that are struggling in sex, that might not be having the sex that they want, once they've sussed out their tiredness and their stress and all of those external factors, then the answer is, okay, like, I need to get more pleasure into my life. I need to be really tapping into what gives me pleasure, what makes me feel good, So like some of the things that I did for myself when I was like going through my own sexual awakening process was buying really nice underwear. And I, wasn't spending hundreds of pounds, but just buying like French knickers and a camisole, silk ones from Marks and Spencer's, not that expensive, but just, putting that underwear on a daily basis, even if no one else was going to see it, for me felt really good. And, for you or somebody else listening, that might not be the thing that gives them pleasure, but, it could be something else. It could be the way something else feels on the skin. And so it's really important to, like, as women, women are designed for pleasure, because if you look at the clitoris' soul's purpose is for pleasure. So women are biologically designed for that. So how can we give ourselves access to as pleasure as much as possible? And also when we are training our nervous system and teaching our bodies to love and experience pleasure, it helps us cope better with stress and anxiety, because we're changing the baseline of where we are on a day-to-day basis. So it just makes it easier when you're able to enjoy the really small things, as you drink your coffee, just allowing it to sort of swirl around your mouth, smell it just before you taste it, notice how it feels, really slowing all of that down. And so when it comes to things like self-pleasure, something that I encourage women and men is to go really, really slowly. So there's an ancient and Taoist practice using something called the jade egg. And that's a really great way to have like a ritual towards your self-pleasure. So rather than just like lying in bed, knocking one out and then moving on with the rest of the day, it's like, how can I show myself, my body, self-love? So how can I touch my hair in a way that feels pleasurable and that I'm showing myself lots of love? How can I touch my face? How can I caress my breasts? How can I love on my belly, which is for a lot of women, and I think you mentioned it before, it's a place where a lot of women feel really uncomfortable and self-conscious. So how can I show those parts of myself all of the love? And then moving down to the thighs and then, to the genitals as well, slowing it right down and noticing how you can build up that feeling of pleasure and spend time in it, rather than racing to the end goal of like, I got to climax, got to have that orgasm. How can I experience as much pleasure as possible and love myself while I'm doing it? And what happens is when you have like that sort of practice, so that ritual for yourself, it changes how you feel about yourself. And it changes also how you relate sexually to the person, that you're with. So it changes how you ask for the things that you want, the things that you don't want, because you understand your body really well and you feel really comfortable with your body. Because one of the things that a lot of women who come to me with problems around sex, discomfort, yeast infections, which is quite often a way of women saying their body's saying no because they're not able to voice it themselves. Vaginismus, which is like tightness of the vagina, like that can't be penetrated, is often the body's way of saying no because the woman can't say no.
Yeah.
You know, quite often it's looking at yourself in the mirror and showing yourself that love. You know, men have like their testicles and their, you know, penis hanging out, and they get to see it very easily every day. For a lot of women, most of it is hidden away. You know, some women are able to see their inner lips poking out. Some women don't, but you don't get to see your own genitals. So building that relationship really gives you that sort of self-confidence to be able to then have somebody else, you know, have their face down there, or for them to be touching you or looking at you as well.
It's a more intimate way of saying, if you can't love you, then how can anyone else? So it's that thing of you got to be at one with your area before someone else does.
And I challenge you, what would you like to call your area instead of your area?
Do you know what? We had this, it was the same conversation with Katie, and she was saying, like, I think...
Pussy. I love the word pussy because it's so empowering. So
I suppose it's because you say it with such conviction. You've really got to
It took me ages to learn to say that. It took me ages. Like even the word vulva used to feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And just to make people aware, vulva is the part on the outside and the vagina is the whole, because a lot of people say my vagina. I'm like,
it's not a whole thing.
Yeah.
So we did a whole 45-minute segment on it. Katie Cotton, if you are listening, she will be thrilled that you are doing this. We saw it recently in quite a big marketing campaign where they just referred to everything as a vagina. We both screenshotted it at the same time. We were like, what is this? I
love the word pussy because I feel that's really empowering. And it took me a while before I could say that. My like lips would feel, you know, like you've got cotton wool and they'd like feel really swollen when you say something that feels really uncomfortable. It took me ages to be able to say that.
Yeah, I struggled used to saying vaginal dryness at my very early days in Elle-Sera, because it would be the wince that people would get, I would get from people that were talking to me. Now I say it with such conviction, no one dare wince at me, because I'm like, well, I'm speaking to women with vaginal dryness all day, and they're like, oh, right, okay then. Pussy. No, I don't know if it is a pussy. I don't know if I talk about mine enough to have a full name for it. I'll have to come back to you on that one. I'll have a think. My problem with that is that I think, as a lot of women do, we associate it with over-sexualized, with like pornography and stuff like that. I think my boyfriend would have a real problem with me kind of going like, oh, do that to my pussy, because he'd be like, we're not porn stars, can we stop please? And I think that there will be other people that would maybe mimic that. I'm far from prudish, by the way, but I think that that's maybe where people get that concern of saying, oh, I don't like saying that word. It's that people don't like the word moist either, do you? I've just said it on a podcast, they'll hate. See, Calvin doesn't like it. There's certain buzzwords that people will go and they'll shy away from, but I'll have a think of what I like to call mine.
And I think this is the thing, and this is why we need to reclaim it. So, you know, the words have been taken from us and used in a different way, are used in a way to be derogatory towards a woman and a woman's body.
Yeah.
And it's about reclaiming that and taking that for ourselves and reclaiming our sexuality. You know, because you were talking about like the objectification of women. And, you know, yes, I agree that there is a lot of objectification of women, and you see that in porn. But if we can sexually liberate ourselves and feel really confident in our bodies, in how we show up sexually, we aren't able to be controlled. You know, we aren't able to be controlled sexually if we empower ourselves in that way. And the thing is, porn bothers us as women, and those things really affect us more so when we don't have a sense of our own sexual empowerment. Because if you feel really confident with your body and you feel really comfortable with how you show up sexually, you're not going to worry about how skinny that woman is and how big her boobs are, or, you know, because you feel good about yourself. You know, quite often, you know, I had a client and she was talking about when she went on a night out, her and her friends would point at other women that, were dressed, with a low cut top or a short skirt and point at her and, and say not very nice things to each other about her. Mm-hmm. And the realization during her session was that she was doing it because that's how she felt about her own sexuality, the shame that she felt about her own sexuality, that she couldn't show up in that way. So instead she projected that judgment onto that woman because she wanted to. A part of her wanted to be that, but felt that she couldn't, so denied that part of herself. So in denial, projected that discomfort onto the woman in front of her. So my invitation is, when you judge another woman, what is it teaching you about the parts of yourself that you're denying?
Well, that is a prime place to stop, because that's going to leave everyone having a think. Carla, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, and we'll leave it with, right, everyone, go out there and reclaim the pussy, shall we?
Yeah, love it.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks.